Hello, I'm Chad Aldeman, a policy analyst at Education Sector. I want to talk with you about a new report we've just released. The report, College and Career Ready, is part of Education Sector's work on accountability. For the past 20 years, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, sometimes known as the nation's report card, has shown that 9 and 13-year-olds have made gains in reading and math. But during that same period, the scores for 17-year-olds, high school students, have remained stagnant. Why have high school scores not made the same progress? There are several reasons. First, state tests given to high school students are written at fairly low levels. They tend to look at students' performance on basic skills, not the skills they need in college and the workforce. Second, there's a lack of agreement on what students should be learning. Should high schools prepare everyone for a 4-year college? What about students who are moving directly into the workforce? Without agreement on these big issues, it's hard to design a meaningful curriculum. Third, until fairly recently, we haven't had ways to measure college and career success accurately. But now all that is changing. Today, new data sources make it possible to look at a student's success after leaving high school. For example, we can measure how students perform when they get to college. Do they need remedial classes? Are their grades high enough to graduate with a degree? And at the same time, we're learning that our current measures don't always do a good job of predicting future success. Let's take a look at the information from one state, Oregon. Currently, Oregon evaluates its high schools by whether they made adequate yearly progress, AYP, under the No Child Left Behind law. Most people would assume that schools making AYP graduate students who are successful in college. But is that true? The charts on the next slides are based on information about students who graduated from 200 Oregon high schools between 2003 and 2007. In all, that's about 35,000 students. Remember, this is information Oregon already collects and already makes publicly available. On this chart, each dot signifies one high school in 1 year. These are the results from schools that met AYP. How did Oregon students do in college? There are two relatively simple ways to measure that. One is to look at students' first-year grades. The horizontal bar shows that the average freshman GPA statewide is about 2.8. The vertical bar shows a second way to measure college success. It's known as the one-year retention rate, the number of kids who are able to stay in school for a second year, and it turns out to be a very good predictor of college success. In Oregon, the statewide average is 78%. In the upper right-hand quadrant, we see a number of schools that have performed as we expected. Their students do earn high GPAs and do return for a second year. For these schools, AYP success does predict student success in college. But there are a lot of schools whose students were not as successful. Look at the bottom left quadrant. These are schools whose students did not earn good grades and did not return for a second year. By most standards, we would say that students from these schools were not prepared for college-level work. Yet these schools met AYP, and as a result, they were deemed to be successful under federal law. We see the same pattern among schools that did not meet AYP. Here's a diagram showing the same data, average freshman grades and retention rates. I should note that these are schools that failed to meet AYP overall, not just because of the performance of one small subgroup. I've added the same lines to this graph that I did in the previous one, and here in the lower left quadrant we see pretty much what we'd expect. Students at these schools aren't very well prepared for college. But despite not meeting AYP, some schools are producing successful students. Here in the upper right quadrant, we see that many of these schools graduate students who go on to college, earn decent GPAs, and are able to stay in school. Now let's compare two individual schools from the same state, Oakland High School and David Douglas High School. Oakland High School is located about an hour south of Eugene, Oregon. In 2007, the school met AYP and graduated 34 students. 8 of these students went on to an Oregon public university, and there they earned a first-year GPA of just 1.89. Only 3 of them, roughly 38%, returned for their second year. But since the school met AYP, it is viewed as a successful school under No Child Left Behind. In contrast, David Douglas High School, located about 10 miles outside Portland, did not make AYP in 2006. It missed the mark because 10th graders, the only students tested, fell below the required benchmark. David Douglas sent roughly the same proportion of its graduates on to public universities as Oakland High School. But David Douglas graduates did much better, earning an average GPA of 2.92, an impressive 90% return for a second year. Yet under NCLB, David Douglas High School was viewed as unsuccessful. What can we learn from the story of these two schools? Perhaps most important, our current high school accountability systems don't always measure student success very effectively. Whether a school makes AYP may not correlate with how well its students perform in college. In my new report, I suggest taking a different approach to measuring student success. Data already exists for measuring how well students do after high school, but we haven't yet incorporated that into our accountability measurements. Doing so would require high schools to make sure that students are ready for college or a career. Instead of depending on an accountability system that rests primarily on testing students for the last time in 10th grade, we can incorporate measures like participation and achievement in AP or IB classes, college going rates, and success in college-level courses. Many states like Florida and Oregon are ahead of the game in collecting this data. Colleges, too, would change. Right now, colleges have an incentive to enroll as many students as possible, whether or not they need remediation. But colleges are not held accountable for whether those students complete their degrees. The new information available today can give the public and policymakers a much richer and more complete view of how students actually perform. Incorporating outcomes data into accountability systems can enhance the way we look at the transition from high school to college. With the right information, both high schools and colleges can do a better job of ensuring student success. For more information or to read the entire report, visit Education Sector's website, or you can email me directly.